I want to apologize. That was obviously the wrong story, but we're going to have Augusta University political science professor Dr. Greg Murray pick it up for us, talking about last night's Democratic debate in Detroit. You were here yesterday talking about night one of this second round. We're going to talk about night two. How did the two nights differ, do you think?
Well, I think it was really interesting. They were completely different nights. The first night was about establishing this bright ideological line between the candidates, sort of the clearly liberal candidates versus the more moderate candidates. I think night two was about the front runner, Vice President Biden, seeing if he could withstand the attacks. He is so far ahead of the other candidates in polling that they're clearly in a mode of trying to bring him down back to the pack so that he could eventually be beat. And that's what they went after him last night. So it was a completely different night.
Now, there were 10 candidates on the stage, but it was billed as Joe Biden versus Kamala Harris.
Yes,
so very what happened last month.
Yes, very much so. Well, one, because they generated so much heat in their discussion last month's debate. But two, she's within the striking range of him, and they're desperately trying to bring him back to the pack so he's within reach to be able to be beat and not just run off with the nomination unscathed. So that's what they're after. That's what they're trying to do. I think Senator Harris was not as sharp last night as she had been previously, but the expectations for her were so extraordinarily high after the last debate that I think it was going to be virtually impossible for her to fulfill those expectations. But you're right, it was billed primarily as Biden versus Harris.
Did any of the candidates, will any of the candidates get a bump from last night's performance?
You know, it's hard to tell. I'm not clear that that's the case. If one of those candidates gets a bump, and I'm not even sure it's a bump, it would be Biden, because he was the one trying to withstand the attack, and he wasn't going to get a bump from it. What he might have experienced was a fall. I think he might have prevented that based on his performance, because he looked basically like he was in control and he was in for the fight. Otherwise, a lot of the candidates had some very memorable things that they talked about, but I'm not sure it was enough to really persuade and bring a lot of voters their way.
Now, the infighting, if you will, the personal attacks versus sticking straight to the issues, did it hurt the Democrats in the long run, you think?
Oh, I think very much so. But I think actually, if you think about who might have been the big winner last night, I think it might have been President Trump, because the candidates spent their evening last night tearing each other down. And while that seems like a self-inflicted wound, and it is, to a degree it's rational. They're running against each other right now. They're not running against Trump right now. To run against Trump, they have to beat the other Democratic candidates. So while it seems self-defeating, and I think it is self-defeating to a large degree, it is rational in the sense of where we are actually in the campaign cycle now.
Now, the next debate isn't until September. So we've got 1 month off, and the DNC is raising the threshold to qualify for the next round.
Right.
What will these candidates be up to? Obviously, they'll be on the campaign trail, but what's the strategy at this point to remain relevant?
Well, what they have to do to remain relevant is be on that debate stage in September. That's going to be tough for a lot of them. They're going to have to gain a lot of ground based on this last debate. I think that's going to be very difficult for some of them to do. The fundraising part is not all that terribly difficult. You can go generate that if you really need to. But in terms of getting the public opinions and support behind them in these polls that they need, from my understanding, at least 2% support in 4 different polls. That's going to be tough for some of these folks to do. And just running from state to state is going to be, in campaigning in individual states, that's not going to really help too much with that. They're going to have to get on the air nationally and try to bump up their support in terms of the public opinion polls. And I think that's what a lot of them are going to do. They've got to be on that stage in September if they want to remain in this race. Dr.
Murray, thanks once again for joining us this morning. Hopefully we'll see you in about a month.
Sounds good.
In the fall.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. We'll be back on the other side. If you have questions,